Okay, we will reconvene the February 24th Dublin City Council meeting. Andy, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We have a special recognition presentation from the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Mr. Dring is here, so please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for the opportunity. If I may, Mayor, I'd like to introduce a couple of our board members. Dr. David Lee from Ohio Health, our president, and then your two city council representatives, Betty Clark and Frank Wilson, and Dave Security is back there as well. So thank you again for the opportunity. Bet, I want to give a kind of quick update on 2019 as we look through the numbers. We had a record year in terms of bed tax revenue, $3.6 million. We were here back in November, and we talked a little bit about the Crown Plaza closing and about 10% of our room inventory being gone and having concerns for this upcoming year, 2020, about what that may do to the bed tax. I can tell you that it appears that it's going to have a little impact. I think we were able to move a lot of that business that was being moved from the Crown over to other Dublin hotels. So I think we projected 2 to 4% decrease. I think it's going to be more like 0 to 2%. So that's good news on that front. There are two real key metrics that involve or influence the bed tax. One is occupancy rates of hotels, and that's what you would think would be the number of rooms that are occupied. Doesn't matter if it's one person or 5 people in a room. And then average daily rate, ADR is what we call. And this is the occupancy number for this past year. 73% of our rooms were filled on an annual basis, which is a huge increase from last year. What does that mean exactly? I can tell you that every 1% increase that we go up is about $900,000 of hotel revenue and about $50,000 of bed tax revenue. So if you just look at moving up 5 percentage points, you're looking close to $5 million, $250,000 into the coffers for the bed tax revenue. So every percentage point that we're able to increase is a positive. I would, if you don't mind me, go on my soapbox for a minute. We talk about these bed tax numbers and occupancy and hotel metrics. The visitor has such more of a greater impact on our community than just staying in a hotel. I'm sure all of you, the last time you went on a business trip or leisure trip, the majority of money you spent was probably not on a hotel, unless it was at a 5-star resort. Is probably on food, entertainment, that kind of thing, and Dublin's no different. A majority of our 2.9 million visitors every year spend money at our restaurants and our shops. That's creating jobs, that's creating economic impact and income tax for the city of Dublin, which is all positive. I can tell you the occupancy rate, too, for the city of Columbus, for comparison's sake, was 66% as well. ADR, the average daily rate, you can see $111, which was an all-time high for the city of Dublin, so doing very well there. The city of Columbus was $106, just for comparison purposes as well. There's really two key things that we do with all this data. One is we look at trends very closely, identify potential issues that we may be having in the market or opportunities, and we also use it to really track our efforts. I'll give you one example of a few years ago what happened. If you look at this chart, these are weekend occupancy rates from April through August. And we came to council in 2015 and said, if you look at this chart, we're really plateauing in the number of visitors that are coming to Dublin. Now, if you looked at bed tax, it was going up because our average daily rate on our rooms were going up. So that's why bed tax was increasing. But the amount of visitors had really begun to plateau. So we came to council in 15 and said we needed to do something else. We asked for additional monies. You guys granted it to us. And what we did is went outside the state of Ohio for the first time and marketed in our regional markets, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Indianapolis, Lexington, and Chicago, in a regional campaign through April and August. So here are the results from 2016. You can kind of see the jump that we saw. And these are all real numbers, no projections, from that point starting in 2016. And remember what I said about the percentage of everything that goes up in terms of percentages. It just means additional dollars for the city of Dublin. So where's opportunities now? What do we see and potentially out there? What is this data telling us? Here's a huge opportunity for us. If you look at our weekend rates through March through November, we are killing it. We're doing very well. 83% of our rooms, 88% are doing well. not so much in December, January, and February. We all love the city of Dublin, but I think we would all agree trying to sell and get leisure visitors here in December, January, and February in Ohio or Dublin, it's a challenge. But if we happen to have an indoor facility that, let's say, would bring in huge events, concerts, youth athletic tournaments, and such, it'd be a game-changing event for our community. I mean, even if we just move it 5 percentage points, you can see what kind of impact that would have on our community and the dollars it would bring. Real quickly.
What would be an industry average there? So, or a
Or-
Columbus average for that December?
Industry average, we're probably a little below the industry average, probably 60 to 65%. Now, keep in mind, those are weekends, so, what's keeping us afloat is our business travel through Monday through Thursday, for the most part. We're still doing well there, but the huge gap is that opportunity to bring those people there as well, so yeah. I lost my thing, but I'll talk through it anyway. Our trails, I just wanted to bring that up quickly because I think it shows things that we're doing that doesn't necessarily involve hotels. Straight off the press, you guys had the Celtic cocktail information in the guide and the shirts. These trails bring visitors to the community. It brings dollars into the community. That trail will be launching Friday for the 3rd year. It has 18 different restaurants all over the city of Dublin that we're bringing. For the first time, we have non-alcoholic options at all those as well. So that is a great opportunity, again, to bring travelers and visitors to the city of Dublin to spend money. The Ferry Door Trail, which I've talked about over the years, that's been wildly successful. It's in its 5th year. We have 14 different retail establishments across downtown Dublin that these people are going to. I think we had our 6,000th visitor just attend. And the great thing about these trails is it's so trackable, because in order to get their prizes, they have to tell us where they're from. We've had people from the Ferry Door Trail alone from 43 states and 8 countries go through that trail. So, and about 50% of those people are Dublin residents. So it's amazing. It's not only a positive thing of getting visitors here, but our residents are enjoying downtown Dublin and spending money as well. I mean, if you see people walking around this summer with little green passports, and usually they have a little bag in one hand where they went shopping or coffee or chocolates for their kids as well. So it's really dumping a lot of money in that as well. The last thing I just want to mention was the bridge. I know we're all excited about the bridge to open in a couple weeks. Our Downtown Dublin Strategic Alliance continues to plug along well. Just to give you kind of real quick background, 4 or 5 years ago when they broke ground in Bridge Park, I think it's fair to say that there was apprehension on the historic Dublin side about what was going to happen to them. And it was really kind of I won't say competitive, but it was an atmosphere that wasn't real positive in terms of both sides of the river. So we thought it was best for the city, for everyone involved, to really get everyone together. And we created this Downtown Dublin Alliance, which included us, the city, HDBA, and Crawford Hoying as well. And after 4 years, we continue to do well. We've created campaigns together. We've created events together. We're meeting monthly. And the most important thing is they're collaborating, and they're working together on the benefit of all of us. So with that, Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Good. Questions from council? No? Well, thank you. We really appreciate all you do. I know you guys work really hard to promote our community and do what's best. So spring's almost here, and there'll be some fun things happening. So
Great.
thanks for what you do.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay, that brings us to the point of our agenda for citizen comments. If anyone would like to speak to council this evening about anything that is not on the agenda, any items not on agenda, if you'd like to bring forward to discuss, now would be the appropriate time. Is there anyone that cares to do so? Hearing none, we have a consent agenda on for this evening. It consists of 2 things, both in the liquor permitted, D5J and a D5A liquor permits. Anyone want to pull from the consent agenda?
No.
Hearing none, is there a motion on the floor? Thank you. In a second. Thank you, Christina. Jenny, please call the roll.
Mr. Keeler?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes. Okay, we have a second reading, ordinance 06-20.
Rezoning approximately 3.47 acres east of Highland Croy Road, south of Mitchell DeWitt Road from PUD, Planned Unit Development District, Oak Park Subarea E, to PUD, Planned Unit Development District, Oak Park Subarea F, for the future development of up to 12 single-family homes and a .66 acre of open space.
Very good, thank you. Jenny is our reporter this evening, so please.
The applicant has requested that this item be postponed until the March 16th meeting.
Very good. Okay. I'll make a motion that we postpone ordinance 06-20 to March 16th meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Christina. Jenny, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Yes.
Mr. Keeler?
Yes.
Mayor Emerald Grooms?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
And ordinance 07-20.
Rezoning with preliminary development plan of a plus or minus 24 acres from PUD Planned Unit Development District, Tartan Ridge, subareas D1, E, and F, to PUD Planned Unit Development District, Tartan Ridge, subarea F, for the future development of up to 56 single-family homes and 7.9 acres of open space. The site is north of McKittrick Road and east of Highland Croy Road.
Very good. Thank you. And Jenny, please.
Yes, good evening. This item was introduced to council at the last meeting. We have no updates for that. There is also an accompanying preliminary plat, which is later on the agenda. I didn't know if you wanted to hear these two items together, or you wanted us to present that part.
We can go ahead and move up resolution 16-20
Okay,
and follow
great.
this.
Okay. So as I mentioned, this was introduced, first reading for the rezoning piece of that area located at the corner of Mitchell DeWitt and Highland Croy Road. It's 24 acres with 56 lots. There's also dedication of open space as well as right-of-way dedication. So the preliminary development plan and the preliminary plat, as outlined in your memo and materials, were reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they're recommending approval. So this requires two motions, one for the rezoning preliminary development plan from Planning Commission with 5 conditions, and then the second is for the preliminary plat with 4 conditions.
Very good. Is the applicant present? Please come forward, state your name and address. If there's any further details you'd like us to be aware of, and your stance on the conditions as presented this evening.
Appreciate that. Council, Mayor, my name's Gary Smith, 720 East Broad Street with G2 Planning and Design. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. We gave a fairly lengthy presentation the last time, so I will spare everybody that torture, just to say that we're here to answer any questions that you have. We really appreciate your consideration this evening, and yes, we will agree to the stipulations.
Very good. Thank you. Is there anyone from the general public present this evening that would like to speak with respect to this legislation? Hearing none. Council questions, discussion? No. Okay, we will deal with ordinance 07-20 first. Jenny, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Emerald Grooms?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Keeler?
Yes.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Yes.
And on resolution 16-20, we've already have the agreement to the conditions.
I'll introduce it.
Very good. Jenny, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mayor Emerald Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Keeler?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. Next is our first readings, ordinance 08-20.
Authorizing the provision of certain incentives to G2O LLC to induce it to lease or purchase a facility to locate and expand its national headquarters and its associated operations and workforce, all within the city, and authorizing the execution of an economic development agreement.
I'll introduce it.
Okay. Colleen is our presenter this
Yes.
evening, so please.
Good evening. So my staff has been in discussions with G2O about the relocation and expansion of their corporate headquarters, which is currently in the city of Columbus. The proposal that is being introduced tonight would result in the relocation of approximately 150 jobs from Columbus to Dublin, and then that company would grow by adding 60 additional jobs by 2027. The proposal is for a 7-year, 15% performance incentive that is only on the new jobs, the 60 jobs that would be added after the company would relocate here from Columbus. And then additionally, after the first 10-year lease, if they would renew for an additional 5, we would extend that performance incentive for an additional 4 years, again, only on those jobs that would be added after they move to Dublin. And I can answer any questions that you have. The company will have a representative here at second reading.
Very good, thank you. Is there anyone present this evening that would like to speak with respect to this legislation? Hearing none. Discussion, questions?
I have a couple questions, and they're more general when it comes to the incentives. You say 20 new jobs would come. If 30 new jobs come, the incentive is still on any new jobs that come, is that correct?
It would be 60 jobs, and that is the minimum that they would need to hit in order to qualify for incentives. They've given us their projections, and we base our proposal on those projections. So if they would add anything above 60, up to the cap that we have set in the agreement. So we have a budgeted amount, so that way they have to be very realistic in the numbers they're giving us. They can't say 60 and then have it be 200, because we do set that cap.
I did understand the cap, I just wondered. And then I just was curious, just in general, I totally agree with the incentive agreements. I think we have some really great agreements that you put together. But all of those agreements define conditions and terms and the number of employees. How does the city actually verify? I know each year with the payroll, W-2s, you get them that way. So I'm assuming that you verify them each year. And then those, is there an annual report? In other words, historically, can you look back and say, we capped out, we didn't cap out, they had this many new employees when they thought they were only going to have this many, they had more than we anticipated, they had less than we anticipated. Do you have a way to kind of monitor the trend of your incentive agreements?
Yes, it's not necessarily in a narrative form, but we do work with Matt in finance, and we're provided with an annual report to show who has hit their numbers or exceeded their numbers, who received payments, who didn't. So we're able to see what number they were supposed to hit and how far they've exceeded, whether they've hit a cap or not. So we do have that, and I believe end of first quarter or maybe second quarter, that goes into packet.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would add, if I could, is that the head count part of this is not something we necessarily
Correct,
focus
it's
on.
all tied to payroll.
Remember, the agreement's really focused on the payroll incentive part of this, not the head count. So,
Right, we don't go in and verify heads, but they say 60 people at this average salary, so we actually look at the 2% that we collect from that salary, whether it's 60 or 62, it's the number that they need to hit in that payroll.
Well, one of the reasons I asked that is because obviously you can tell your successes by the amount of payroll, income tax payroll you get. But would it also help you flag a struggling company that you had hoped would be doing well and you might need to aid in helping them get up and going? Do you know what I'm saying? I'm also looking at it as a way to just measure how well new companies coming into the city are doing.
Right, and we have an internal policy where we don't incentivize shrinking companies, but we have had companies that moved here with projections that did not hit those. So we've been able to monitor companies that have had some struggles. Luckily, these are performance-based, so it's not that they receive payment and then we would have to worry about clawing back. If they perform, they get it. If not, they don't. But we definitely have had conversations with some companies that have struggled to hit some of their numbers.
Right, and that would be mainly for me to think that we would be able to offer them resources to help, some of them are young companies, fledgling companies, that you would just be a red flag to say, you know what, we might need to throw some advice or some business acumen or some resources there.
This was a situation, especially with a few companies the last few years that were in the IT space that were struggling because they couldn't hit their payroll because they couldn't find the right employees. So that's also one of the things that played into our workforce development programs when we realized it was a resource issue, they couldn't find the people.
Okay, thank you.
We also tend to see those at budgeting time because we see what you actually spent versus budgeted, and that difference can help tell that story as well. So we will look forward to second reading on March the 2nd.
Great, thanks.
Okay, we have an introduction, Resolution 15-20, appointing members to the Architectural Review Board. And I believe Kathy has a report for us.
Great, thank you very much. We had 3 vacancies to fill on the ARB due to Mr. Keeler's successful election to City Council and other work conflicts with some of our other members. So we held interviews on the evening of the 27th of January,
And as Chair of the Administrative Committee, I am pleased to bring forward the following candidates for appointment. Sean Cotter to fill the unexpired term of Mr. Keeler's beginning immediately, and ending March 31st, 2021. Frank Kowalski to fill an unexpired term effectively immediately and ending March 31st, 2022. And Amy Cram to fill an unexpired term effective immediately ending March 31st, 2022. So I thank all the ARB members. I thank all the new ARB members. So with that.
Very good, thank you. Is there anyone present this evening that would like to speak with respect to this legislation? Hearing none, is there further discussion among council? Hearing none, Jenny, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Keeler?
Yes.
Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Very good. Well, congratulations to those folks, and we look forward to their efforts. In our other category on our agenda this evening, we have a request to serve alcohol for St. Patrick's Day event from the Fido Pub and Kitchen, and I believe Allison is going to present to us this evening.
Good evening, members of council. You guys asked me for something fun earlier, so I think we're preparing for one of the most fun weekends in Dublin. And we're really excited that Fido is coming back for their second year. This will be their second St. Patrick's Day open in their location in Bridge Park. So they're going to be doing the tent party again. And what's really nice is they had planned to do it, and we asked them to extend it to Friday night because we'll be opening the bridge that night. And they have agreed to do that, and they have some special plans for that as well. But Ian Montgomery is here to answer any questions and kind of give an overview of the event.
We will need your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, it's Ian Montgomery, 1212 Darkan Drive. Mayor, council members, opportunity to come out here. Again, it's our second year. We are going to have the tent in Bridge Park for Friday for the big bridge opening. We're going to have music in the tent. Tent will open at 6 p.m. The band will take a break for the festivities of the bridge opening. The band is Swag, by the way, and they'll go back on afterwards. We also have some Irish music inside with Innisfree, formerly Ballybeg, if you know your Irish music around here. And we also have Rich and Tim's Irish Dance Academy will be there also. And then that leads us into Saturday, where we will open at 9 a.m. and we'll do live music in the tent from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Also this year we're going to have music inside in the main pub all day as well. And then Sunday morning the tent goes bye-bye for another year. And then Paddy's Day on the Tuesday, it'll all be inside our own four walls.
Very good. Well,
With them on their plans, we adjusted, last year was a nice learning year with our police officers and knowing how many people they would need throughout the day, so we've made some adjustments there too. I know some of you attended last year, and working with Washington Township, they kind of rearranged the tent setup so what are those things called, on the outside of the tent, so there's a little more room in the tent to move around, so we think that'll help with kind of the flow in there as well. So we let you approve their waiver.
very good. Thank you. Anyone present this evening from the general public that would like to speak with respect to this legislation? Hearing none. Comments from council? Questions? No? Sounds like a good time. Okay. Very good. Is there a motion on the floor? And a second?
Second.
Jenny, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Keeler?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Yes.
Very good. Well, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Allison, do we have a lot of event permit requests coming in for that weekend?
I really don't. I think that people are doing inside. It kind of comes down to the weather. We've heard of a lot of businesses. We've had, I think it was Sweetwater asked to use the logo on some cookies. So I think a lot of people have specials and stuff to sort of bring people in around the area. So not a lot of outside stuff, but mostly inside.
Very good. Okay, to maintenance of reservoir management ponds and basins. Some members of our Community Advisory Commission and Paul Hammersmith here talk us through that.
Good evening. Council requested the Dublin Community Services Review the city's past practices regarding the maintenance of stormwater management basins, dry, and residential areas within Dublin. The goal of this act to make a recommendation to a future policy and guideline on the maintenance of residential water management basins. The Commission gave this topic a great deal of time and consideration, discussing the topic at their September and November 2019 meetings and most January 2020 meeting. They heard detailed data research presented by city. The Commission worked to understand the roles play in the city's overall stormwater management system, the city's current inventory of basins necessary to ensure the basin is maintained, and the associated of that maintenance. And information, presenting minutes associated with CSAC's review are included in your packet for the meeting this evening. I would like to introduce Marilyn Baker, a CSAC member, to present their findings and recommendation. Ms. Baker.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Thank you. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and other council members. I'm Marilyn Baker, and I'm representing the Community Services Advisory Commission. We were charged with the task of advising council on whether the city considered taking over or assuming, if you will, maintenance of residential stormwater management basins which are owned and located on Dublin property, but which are currently maintained by various homeowner associations. And we had you have a detailed memo that Paul, thank you very much, by the way, for the introduction. Paul just provided you, and also you have our detailed commission meeting minutes, which thank you for staff for that. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes to highlight our discussions and recommendation. The staff provided us with considerable amount of information and research and data and regarding this aspect, and we discussed this over 3 meetings, actually. Just completed it. The topics I'll highlight again, as Paul did, were regarded engineering design, Dublin stormwater inventory, the types, management system, maintenance practices, estimated annualized cost, possible funding options, and previous City of Dublin stormwater utility fee discussions. Also, the Ohio Stormwater Utility Program and how other municipalities address the basin maintenance and agreements with homeowner associations. So we reviewed the information on all 305 residential basins within Dublin. These they're located on private property and maintained by private property owners. There are 154 basins which are owned by the City of Dublin that are on City of Dublin property. Of these, 108 are maintained by the City of Dublin, while 46 are maintained by various homeowner associations. And so from these broad discussions, the commission members were better able to understand the management complexities, the importance and impact on the community in maintaining stormwater basins, as well as recognizing the associated cost implications, which could be considerable. So while discussions were broad, we ultimately focused on the topic assigned. So first I want to say and relay for the commission members that we commend Dublin for having been and still is in the forefront of maintaining basin maintenance. Second, members concur that the City of Dublin truly is best suited to maintain the stormwater basins which are located on Dublin property. And this is supported by the following, and I'll mention the highlights of our discussion. The city possesses the engineering expertise, knowledge of water quality protection measures, they have the experience of maintaining these basins, and they have the equipment needs that are necessary for both appropriate and effective maintenance to ensure the integrity of the water and the land surrounding it. Second, the city presently maintains the existing stormwater pipes discharging into and out of the 46 basins, which are now maintained by the homeowners associations. The near future costs for maintenance issues could be extensive for homeowner associations, and particularly considering the age of these basins. Ultimately, Ultimately, the city is responsible, legally responsible for meeting Ohio EPA regulations, and this also is coming at a very timely area, since in 2010, the total maximum daily loads created by Ohio EPA highlighted that the north and south banks of the Indian Run were a non-attainment status, and so, as I understand it, that area will be under review, possibly coming up this year or the near future. So after careful review and consideration of all the information, the council recommends that that the council consider that the city going forward would assume the ongoing responsibility and maintenance of all city-owned residential stormwater management basins, and this includes all the 46 which are currently being handled by the homeowner associations. Further, the commission, since we discussed the funding, the costs and funding possibilities, commission members understand that the city will want to review funding mechanisms for this and to provide for associated incremental costs. And therefore, based on the outcome of those decisions, the commission members also wanted me to relay that they'd be interested in further exploring funding options for the city-owned basins if the council decides that feedback would be helpful. So I speak for each and every commission member when I say we appreciate the work and time dedicated by staff for the discussions and the opportunity for us to weigh on this important issue. And as always, it's a privilege, all of us voice that it's a privilege to be a part of the commission. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I know I can speak for each and every council member in thanking you and the team on CSAC for really thorough and hard work. Those are a lot of details, and we so appreciate your willingness to wade in those waters, no pun intended this evening, for us and garner good feedback. So,
Yeah. And it was fun looking at them, too. I went out and saw all of them.
all 100 and...
No, all 46.
46, okay.
That's what we were to look at. I threw a few in, just for comparisons.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Council questions?
Out of curiosity, how many of those were in Muirfield Village?
How many are in Muirsfield? No, none of them.
None of
No.
None of them.
No, none of them.
None of them.
These are ones
Owned by the city, maintained by the HOA. I got it.
Maintained by the HOAs, yeah, and none in Muirfield have that
And these
contract.
predominantly from probably 1998, from our best estimation, on forward to probably, within 5-10 years ago was that practice.
So what is the total roughly annually that would add to our, I did some back of the napkin stuff, but I could be way off. If you take a look at, that's what I got too.
$700,000.
Yeah. Did you have it?
It's, it would be about $700,000.
Right. It's about 2,000 or 3,000 each, depending on dry or wet.
Yeah.
For maintenance, and
It's
then...
about $228,000 on an
That's what I
annualized
got,
basis,
yeah.
an additional cost.
Yes, that's what I
An
got, an additional cost,
beyond
yes.
the 108 that we're currently maintaining.
And those were just annual maintenance. That did not include any capital repairs or
No,
things
that
of
was
that
really just
nature.
purely maintenance.
Yeah.
Sedimentation removal, vegetation management, head wall repairs, and sort of things, fountains.
So where does, just for the sake of discussion, where does the responsibility for paying, what document is that created in?
Predominantly on the plat. Probably the best example to give you recently that you've just heard rezonings on is Oak Park is a good example. If you go back and look at the plat for Oak Park when it was originally created, it indicates that all the reserve areas are owned by the city of Dublin. The maintenance of those open spaces is that of the HOA, the maintenance responsibility. The ponds themselves are delineated as being the city of Dublin's maintenance responsibility. So that's a good example. Just north of there, Celtic Crossing, another good example. Same situation. And then Tartan Ridge, the rezoning you just heard this evening, with that new development, there's a basin located just south of the elementary school, but it's located on private property created when the development was originally zoned. And they'll continue to be privately maintained. the basin will. And that was a choice of the developer to keep maintaining that basin.
And so in the capital repairs, if a drain breaks or whatever, that's probably in that same document, I would imagine?
It doesn't get into that sort of detail. It just indicates that, I mean, it specifies that stormwater management pond, the associated amenities are the responsibility of Dublin.
And so if one of them falls, as Marilyn mentioned, falls into disrepair, EPA shows up and says, you know, your guy's water is purple, you better do something, at least the documents, the way they currently exist, that would still fall to the HOA.
Correct. That is correct.
And it is advantageous to those HOAs to deed the underlying ground to the city of Dublin for their property tax purposes, correct?
Correct.
That's primarily why that practice happens, because it will lower their property tax bill. You know, they don't own that property, it's owned by the city, therefore it's not a tax consequence to the HOA.
Yeah, that was one reason. The other was we began to realize that if they were on private property, if the city needed to step in, that we were basically needed to get rights to get on that property. And if the city actually owned the underlying fee, we had the ability to get on the property and do maintenance if needed, because ultimately that really falls on us, is our responsibility.
One of the major concerns, discussions that we had also was the knowledge base of people within the homeowners association, and also the turnover of board of directors. And so while the city gives advisement on how to manage them and maintain them, you know, you don't know how much that translates as time goes on. And it's a pretty critical issue if you're maintaining all the property around and also have no idea what to do with the water quality.
So, Paul, what is the interconnectedness of all these different stormwaters? And I applaud you for having it rain for this presentation
Just-
tonight. That
just
was
for this
really good.
occasion.
That was brilliant, that was great.
Let's see if I can stop it.
That was really good. So, but we have some privately maintained, city maintained. I mean, this has got to be an ecosystem. Educate us a little bit about the consequences of good and bad and ugly.
Well, twofold. This is a great discussion because this was kind of part of the first meeting with CSAC, was educating them on the whole system itself and how ponds work within our stormwater management system. But the basins themselves really have two roles. First and foremost, rate release, whether they detain water permanently, you know, and that's a wet basin, or just temporarily retain it, which is a dry basin. But again, it's that rate release to prevent erosion and sedimentation control. And that's really was the primary purpose of the basins as part of our system. Secondarily, it became water quality component for extended detention to allow impurities to settle out from the water itself. And, you know, Dublin was one of the first communities to implement back in 1998 a quality component. So it's really twofold, you know, rate control and then secondarily quality control as that water collected within that development gets released into our system and ultimately ends up in a creek leading to the Scioto River.
And the third one wouldn't be left out without the aesthetics.
Yeah, that's true. They've provided a great aesthetic component.
Thank you. Paul, if it's so important that we maintain quality control, and I'm thinking this from the planning and zoning standpoint, why would we ever allow a private pond to exist as a stormwater retention? Because you always take the risk that it won't be cared for. So why wouldn't we always require the developer to give that pond space fee to the city?
I think it's a great question. I would say that private entities, commercial properties, whether it be an office building or apartment complexes, have really become sophisticated and have evolved into providing for that maintenance. You know, it is on their property. They have a responsibility to maintain that basin, to keep the water quality good. And then we have code provisions that allow us to get in there and step in if we need to assure that they do that. So again, you know, it's a requirement, just as the roof on the building is necessary for their development, so is the basin and the pond itself. And it is, the mayor pointed out, they also provide an aesthetic component. So sometimes they want to maintain it above and beyond what we normally would as a stormwater feature. They would like it to be, you know, probably have a different character for an aesthetic component.
And I certainly understand that in commercial, but we have, as we did with Tartan Ridge, that is going to be maintained by that that 56-member HOA. And that's a burden. I mean, it's only 56 homes, and they're maintaining a fairly large stormwater pond there. I just wonder if we shouldn't have that discussion or ask CSEC to think about whether residential stormwater ponds by residential HOAs should ever be private.
Well, there's certainly an amenity component to them that, we saw, the name is escaping me right now, up on Mitchell DeWitt, the 12, 14 homes, whatever there, and they had quite a large pond.
Hamlet on Jerome.
Hamlet on Jerome, thank you. Many of these ponds are designed to be an amenity. And that amenity, I think part of the conversation is going to have to be the cost of an amenity. Should that be spread among all of the taxpayers of the city of Dublin or the people that benefit from it directly? So I think it is a sticky wicket. It is, they aren't just stormwater in the city of Dublin. Many of them are lined with, limestone boulders and, I think additionally, sometimes the expectation for when the city does something is different than when the expectation is that the homeowner is doing something. So I think that it is a wonderful conversation to have, and there's a lot to it.
No, there really is, and we see it in planning and zoning quite frequently because commissioners require quite a bit of landscaping around these ponds, whether they're private or they're public. We require the same thing. And I noticed in the, I think it was you have some design guidelines about ponds I read through, and for all the different kinds of retentions. And it talks about perimeter buffering. And we do lay some fairly high quality standards on it. But I'm just trying to figure out why would we ask some developers to keep it private for a small number, and yet others, because you require a stormwater pond. A Tartan Ridge development couldn't get away from that. They used it as an amenity, but it's a requirement. They had to have it. So I think we have to talk about that, because it could be a burden that will just fall back to us anyway.
Yeah, and, I mean, honestly, we really, if you even think about condominium associations, we really haven't had that conversation with them about the maintenance of their basins. Rarely does that occur, other than guidance. They may contact us and ask us for some opinions about what they might need to do or how to address a particular issue, but that's not a request that we've received.
Paul, so the slide that you had that showed the benchmarking residential utility fee rates, those rates were per what?
Per equivalent residential unit. And that's somewhat of a confusing term, but how stormwater utilities have been created is they basically determine for one single residential lot, the impervious area on that lot. And then from that determination, that's the one ERU. And so based on the size of your lot, or if you're a commercial property, you may have 20 ERUs, and the rate is per ERU. So
And this is per month or per year?
per month.
This is per month?
Yeah, so for instance, the city of Delaware, it's $2.50 per month, per ERU.
And that's paid for by the association?
No, it's paid for
The
by
Property
homeowner?
owner.
Got
the
it.
individual.
Got it.
Is every resident, is that every resident in the city?
Yep,
Correct.
Every resident, not just the ones that have a pond?
not just the ones benefiting from
And
that.
commercial property owners.
So as the city continues to develop and there's more ponds, et cetera, that fee is likely to continue to increase,
Correct.
and the cost continues to increase. And I think one of the challenges, the complexity of this is the developments where there's 2 or 3 homes and there's a very large basin, we're adding that cost. I think it's a complex issue, as you guys clearly discovered as you're going through here and figuring out what would we expect the developer to contribute to that, just as they do to road maintenance and some other things, right, when they're, so I think it's a multifaceted conversation about how to fund that go forward, because.
I do too, and I'm not sure we can make a decision about whether we do this without having that really detailed funding question. And I'm all for having that conversation and talking about the funding. I think it's a really important conversation. It'll shape how we have developments come to us into the future. But I would definitely need to have that funding conversation before falling on one side or the other of.
Well, I think
the
that's
decision.
probably what our next step of asking CSAC to do. And, I just want to make sure that when we start talking about those fundings, we talk about, and I am, certainly not an expert in that funding, but, can you do SIDS? Can you do something that the cost of the detention pond, the folks that are benefiting from that pond, is there any circles you can draw around that? And, try to make sure that the people that are benefiting from having their water treatment done there and having the amenity in their neighborhood are the ones that are primarily funding its existence. And I don't know how you do that, and those are questions for you guys to answer. I don't pretend that we would go down that route this evening, but I guess I would ask if it's council's pleasure to ask CSAC to take the next step and start looking at what the funding options would be, provided we would assume responsibility of these basins at some point in the future.
I don't necessarily have a problem with the city testing the water and making sure that that's probably a wise thing to do, and approaching the HOAs and saying, look, we have that expertise, we have the experience, we as a city can perform the function. But as far as the person who's funding for that pond to exist, I'm really uncomfortable upsetting this contractual arrangement that was made when the neighborhood was put in.
Yep.
The developer marketed the homes and priced the homes, and the people purchased the homes, and they knew what their financial responsibility was going to be moving forward, and now we're sort of upsetting that and taking those neighborhoods that have that particular extra expense and spreading it over the whole city. And I've been in here long enough to know that once we do that with stormwater ponds, then it's going to be something else where people say, well, hey, this is getting burdensome on my neighborhood. I'd like the city to pay for this. I think it's a really dangerous road to go down, because the market set these prices. The market set, the beautiful pond when you drive into the neighborhood. That's what got people in there wanting to be in that neighborhood. And then now we're going to turn around and say, yeah, but the rest of the city is going to pay for the maintenance of those ponds. If this were a situation where we were changing things the other way and saying, hey, guess what? You guys are now going to be responsible for this. Congratulations. I wouldn't think that would be appropriate either. And I'm not sure going the other way is wise. So I would need to know a lot more about where the money was going to come for the city to do it before I could say it's a good thing for the city to tell everybody we're going to take that upon ourselves. And the people, when they go to pay their water bill, they'll just see it as more taxes. This is another tax on their water bill. How did my water bill go up? Why is my water bill going up? And we say, well, because there's ponds all over the city that we're now going to assume. It's just a very dangerous thing, I think, to do. I think the intentions are very, very well-meaning, and the quality of the water in the system all functioning is really important. And I don't have a problem with the city being involved with all that. I'm just really uncomfortable upsetting what the market said and what people's expectations were, and changing other people's expectations that had no idea they were going to be paying to maintain 46 ponds around Dublin.
Yeah, and this really only addresses 46 of the 305 that exist. And so it would be incredibly difficult to, I completely agree, Greg. People moved into an association, the fees were established, and, to spread that out among everyone in the city. And who's going to bear the largest burden of that is going to be our corporate citizens. And I don't know that that's what we want to do.
Right, and I think, you bring up a very good point, Greg, because we're looking at not only ponds, but right-of-way landscape easements, too, we're discussing, because that's on private property. Trees need to be replaced. City's looking at ways that they're trying to get. The end point here is that we want the best quality water in these ponds that we can get, and the problem is that when you have private maintenance of them, you don't know that you're going to assure that. So maybe when you study this, instead of an overall charge to every resident in the city, It's what is the most effective way, most efficient and cost-effective way for private homeowners associations to maintain a pond utilizing the resources of the city? Is there a way that they can contract with the city and say, listen, we will pay the city to maintain our pond, you know how to do it, and they may pay a little cheaper rate with us than they would with a private company? I mean, what we're really trying to do is get good quality water, just like we're trying to get nice landscaped edges along our corridors. So how do we help our private homeowners do that? Maybe that's where you could focus on.
So Paul, for the maintenance work that we do, I assume a lot of it is done with in-house employees? And but we also contract, don't we?
Most of it's done through a contract.
Contract?
Annual stormwater maintenance contract that you approve every 2 years. Yeah, so that,
possible that they would-
they're really kind of some simpler things.
Yeah.
But the more sophisticated maintenance is done by contract.
Right, so I think, again, I think this needs discussion, but I think to Jane's point, is there a way that the homeowners associations can piggyback on with that? I think they're all really good questions. Again, I think the conversation is worth having.
And
I'm sorry. And I would think, again, we're seeing some of these developments come through. We're not necessarily, nor am I suggesting that we read all the covenants and all the language inside these homeowners agreements, but going forward, I would think part of these recommendations are some really, a review of what those, perhaps we have a standard set that has to be included, and cost estimates that we feel with annual growth rates on those things. Because I think part of the problem is the few that I've had a chance to see set sort of, here's our cost today, but time goes on, prices go up, maintenance happens 15 and 20 years later, and they find themselves that at the time, maybe that was sufficient, but the interest rates or whatever on that money are not funding the cost, what we're seeing, and so we get ourselves into trouble longer term. So some more rigor in what is the expectations of these, because they're only going to increase as we go forward. And I think maybe that's also something to think about as we're thinking about funding that. So, thank you.
Kathy, I think you make a great point, by the way. I know we've said this before, but this sort of speaks to the whole process of developers bringing HOA fee pro formas way earlier in the game. And right now, they don't because they're not required to. But it speaks very much to that point, that it's like, how do you know that you're going to be able to afford to fund these things that your HOA is going to be affording for the long term? So I very much take that point.
Good. Well, I guess I would ask that if we have interest, and I know that I do, of referring this back to CSAC to kind of chase down some of these details and start looking at the what-ifs. If we were to accept their recommendations, what would that look like, and what would all of the different opportunities? And I'm hopeful that we'll be really creative and trying to think out of the box on some of them. Maybe they won't work out, but at least it would be a good exercise.
Is that your motion?
We're not going to do motion or vote on this. We will just do a referral, because I don't want to make a motion accepting a recommendation, which would be an unfunded mandate to us. So we'll send it back to them and ask them to look at some other things and know how much we appreciate all of the work that you have done to this point. And now we're just going to give you a whole nother pile of work to do. Aren't you glad you came tonight?
We had a very similar discussions as you have had here, but we reminded ourselves, wait a minute, we weren't asked to talk about how to fund it. We were just asked, what do you think of this? And so we had to narrow it down, so.
Well, thank you so
If I
much.
could just say one final thing. One thing that's really tricky about this issue is that if you opened it up and put out, notice of this meeting, and we're going to talk about this, you could get someone from 46 neighborhoods that come in and say, this is a good idea for the city to pay for. The problem is, we all represent everybody else.
Right.
And not everybody else would come in and say, well, now, wait a minute, this is going to kind of stink for the rest of us. You know what I mean? You don't hear that as loud.
Now we get to pay for yours and ours.
Exactly. So I would just maybe keep that in mind as you guys go through your
Right.
options. So, thanks.
Good. I do want to take a moment for public comment. Would anyone like to speak with respect to this topic? Hearing none. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think
Thank you.
you have some clear direction of what we would like looked at next, and
Okay.
we sure do appreciate all your work.
Great, thanks a
Thanks,
lot.
Marilyn. Okay, staff comments?
Good evening, members of council. The only comment I have is to remind the public about our State of the City to be held Thursday, March 12th. That will start at 6 p.m. at the Exchange in Bridge Park. 6 to 7 is reception, 7 to 8 is presentation, 8 to 8:30 is networking. Then, of course, the bridge opening following that on March 13th with 7 p.m. with music and some celebration, really, I believe, on both sides of the river, I think is how it's being set up. But monitor that on our website to see where those are. The grand illumination, it's called, will be at 8 p.m., open to the public at 8:30, and then a light show generally from 8 to 11. And, of course, the St. Patrick's Day will be on Saturday, March 14th, with the pancake breakfast, which is my favorite, from 7 to 11 at Sells Middle School. 9 o'clock a.m. is the inflation celebration in Metro Center. That's sponsored by Grader's Ice Cream. We appreciate that. And then at 11 o'clock starts the parade. And I just want to thank all the sponsors in advance for all their support of this parade, our many community volunteers who truly make it the success that it is, as well as our staff who work really hard for its presentation and execution. And are there any questions you have? That's all I have for this evening.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Planning and zoning, Jane. Okay, very good. Community Development Committee, John is our chair. He isn't here this evening. Andy, do you have anything you'd like to add for the Community Development Committee? No? Good. I know we have a meeting coming up, I think the 16th, 17th, something like that. Finance, Christina.
Yeah, we had our first meeting where we pretty much set the agenda for the year. We put together both the CIP and the budget schedules, so those are available to you if you'd like to have them. And then we also saw the rating presentation, and I don't know that we've seen the rating presentation in the past. So thanks to Matt for pulling that together. He kind of like breezed through it really quickly, but it was really, I thought the information in it was really helpful in understanding all the stuff they have to pull together to be able to go out to those rating agencies so that we can get our AAA ratings across the board. I thought it was a very nice experience, so that's it.
Very good. Public Services, Jane.
Yeah, we had a meeting concerning property maintenance, vacant housing. We also talked about right-of-way and landscaping and the bridge parapet. So you'll have to give me just a couple minutes to fill you in here. On property maintenance, I want to thank Jennifer and Jenny and the Planning Department in helping us gather information about property maintenance. I think it's a conversation we've had in this past year. The city has been operating under the 2009 International Property Maintenance Code, and there is an updated code. It's quite lengthy, the 2018. This code is not very much different than the 2009 code, but if you take the time to read Chapter 3 and 4, especially on property maintenance, you'll see that it has quite a bit of teeth to it, a lot of teeth. And in talking to Greg Jones, our code enforcement officer, who's been around for quite a number of years, he was quite enlightening on the things he deals with and the kinds of code enforcement issues he has to resolve every day. One of the great things that I heard is that 98% of the concerns or the code enforcement issues he deals with, he can resolve without any kind of a fine or penalty or whatever. Most of these are complaint-driven or concern-driven by neighbors or whoever, and he and his staff try very hard to just work with our residents to try to resolve the problem without going very far. We asked him specifically what it was that he needed and what he felt was most effective, and that he says one of the most important things for him is educating our residents on how to maintain the property. And I know through communications we're doing some of that. We're a very diverse community, and not everybody maintains their property the same way. So I think one of the things that council should get behind is making sure that they have all the resources to create educational materials, that we use our websites to do that sort of thing, and to help maybe even give something to realtors when new homes are purchased. Concerning the vacant property, there are vacant property ordinances that we looked at. They could be quite intensive for staff. So one of the recommendations that we asked Jennifer to come back with was possibly looking at the vacant property ordinances and cherry pick out of that code what we might be able to add to our present code to just make it a little easier to be able to enter a vacant property if necessary, or do we just need, we only have about 12 to 14 in the city. It's not like we have 100, right? But maybe find ways that we can utilize that code to enhance our own code without going too heavy on legislation. Rental properties are a problem for code enforcement because they can't always find the person that owns the rental property in order to address the issues. Franklin County Auditor does require a contact name for all rental properties. So we thought it wasn't probably important that we repeat that here, but we're trying to see if we can't get, and code enforcement does go to the auditor's office, but he did say it would be helpful if he knew who owns rental properties, so it's a consideration. Just getting the contact names is their biggest problem. So the first recommendation out of the public services is that we adopt the 2018 code. I think that's a pretty easy, we've been operating under this code for a long time. Secondly, what I mentioned to you about Jennifer looking at the vacant property ordinance. And then I think that the one thing that we did not get to, and we didn't have, it wasn't on the agenda, but I do think we need to bring it back up to public services, is the large billboard signs, the lease billboard signs. We didn't have a discussion, we had a pretty heavy agenda, so we are going to bring that back to public services. When it came to the right-of-way landscape screening, Matt did a great presentation, Matt Ehrman did a great presentation on that. The problem is that the trees that are planted in the right-of-way, 80%, and he had them all marked which ones were bad and which ones were tired. There are over 100 trees missing along the, I think it was the Muirfield-Avery strip. There are some strong limitations about replacing them. There are utility easements in those right-of-ways. They're on private property, and at this point, it would be a large cost to the residents. So he's going to be coming back on March 3rd to make some recommendations and have an opportunity for further discussion on that. What we asked him to do is write a report to council to consider how we look at Greenway Corridor Protection Program. In other words, these greenways, these major greenways, are really the visual sort of front door to the city. We certainly can't landscape every street, but maybe we need to think a little bit about major corridors and how we address them. So he's going to come back and give us some thoughts on that. And then the last thing was the bridge parapet with the Dublin little concrete piece that you can barely see. Two options were presented to us. Paint the Celtic symbol green, the words Dublin, I guess it was Dublin, and the second option was paint it green and the little stripes that go across. None of us thought that was a good idea. So what we thought is that and we don't know very much about concrete and how you stain it, seal it, polish it, or make it look pretty. So we actually sent that back to the bridge designer. We asked the staff to take that back to the bridge designer who designed the bridge in the first place and make suggestions. So that is what we accomplished in the public services.
Very good, thank you. Coda, Kathy?
Yes. Just one quick thing. You may have seen the announcement this week that in this last year, 2019, CODA saw the highest level of ridership that they have seen in 31 years. So over 19 million rides were given. So this is particularly interesting because what we're seeing across the country is a bit of a decline in ridership in public transportation. So this comes back around to the conversations we've had about increased opportunities to think about public transportation and different mobility options. One of the reasons for that increase was there was a major redesign of their routes. They added the CMAX, which is the high-frequency route, and then they launched the CPAS program, where we're seeing corporations and organizations funding some of that. So some of those things are happening, and that's very positive and continue to go forward. But I think it really is an example of if we can think about traditional things in new ways, we can see some growth in ridership. So congratulations to them on that.
Very good, thank you. Friendship Association, Christina, Andy?
Nothing this time.
Very good. MORPC, I will just say Thea Walsh was here before us a month or so ago and talked to us about the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, something that we need to be very concerned about because that's how transportation projects will get prioritized in Central Ohio and identified. So they do have an open house on February 26th at the MORPC office. But I don't know if we can push out feedback on our requesting feedback. You can chime in online, and I don't know if through our communication tools we would have the opportunity to push those out to our residents, because many of these transportation ideas would have profound impacts on us as a community, and the ones that get selected will come with significant funding. So please be aware of that, and let's try to get our folks to participate to the maximum level, and maybe we can have some of ours rise to the top of that list. The Logan Union Champaign County, Andy?
I attended the meeting on the 13th. I don't know if any of you have ever been to one of their meetings, but about 30 people. Think of city council and planning and zoning all in one room together, making those kinds of decisions. And what I found interesting, again, it was my first meeting, covers 3 counties. 3 of the 5 cases that they heard were on our perimeter. Either Highland Croy or off of Industrial Parkway. So this is where the activity is, and we need to be obviously working hard to do what we can. I learned about home rule. I'd never heard of that. Evidently, they don't have that benefit like we do, so it makes it very difficult for them.
Very good, thank you. 33 Corridor, Kathy Jane?
Yes, so thank you. We had met, I guess, last Friday, and we're continuing to have, I guess I'll piggyback on Andy's comments here, really good coordination and opportunities to talk about all of that activity that we are all mutually involved in. Lots of good growth going on up and down that corridor, and what this group talks about and shares are what those opportunities are. And then we also talk about the challenges, and one of those that we know continue to be traffic. So happy to say that Union County is looking at doing a traffic study, or is beginning to look at a proposal for a traffic study along Industrial Parkway, as particularly related to the 33 interchange and 42, and a lot of the ODOT work that's happening there. And I know one of the conversations we've had with that group and continue to have is to look, of course, on the traffic study and the impacts of Highland Croy. I mean, we're seeing our actions here and actions of our neighbors. One of, I think, really nice collaborations that have come from that group is, while it's certainly important to look at each of those, it's probably even more important to look at those 2 together, because activity up and down Industrial affects Highland Croy, affects 42, et cetera, so forth. So Union County, our partners there, are looking into seeing what I would call them mutual but independent type work studies being done. On Highland Croy, they've reached out to the MORPC group to see if there are opportunities for them to conduct that study, but continue to look at this in a more holistic way, and hopefully to do that in short order here, because every car we put on that, it impacts all of that. So again, a nice example, and we're optimistic that we continue to do this, we're going to find better solutions if we do this together. So good work there, and we'll continue to keep you updated about the progress.
Very good. We will wait for John next time for a report from the Arts Council. Board of Education, Craig? Our good friends from Washington Township are here. And Jane, anything to report on the township front? Got a big day coming up here in March the 17th, so we hope folks get out and vote their conscience for that levy. We'll hope for good things. Dublin Bridges, Jane? Complete count, Christina.
Yeah, we're meeting monthly at this point. I wanted to make it a point to mention that no census information will be taken before March 12th. March 12th is when the census documents will begin to hit mailboxes. So even if you think you may have filled out something that said census in the past, there's nothing official that will go out until March 12th. I think we might try to put together a News in 90 to help get that out, and we have actual documents, the ones that will be mailed to people's homes. So I would urge people to keep on the lookout for those things beginning March 12th, and to fill out that census. The census is what really dictates the dollars that come to the state. And we're doing our level best to work with the schools and community groups to try to reach out to some of our harder-to-reach populations so that we can get everybody counted. So that work is ongoing for now and really important.
I'm sure this exists, it's probably a silly question, but there probably is a price per person you count, right? That your community will receive if you count everybody in terms of how they'll consider folks. Do we have any numbers like that that would help us communicate the level of importance that we count everybody?
I don't think so. All these grants are kind of competitive, but I think if you, and Councilmember Ludo know better than I do, but really this is talking about making sure we're accurate as a region, probably just more so as an independent city. Obviously, it's important to us to understand our demographics and our count here in the city for a lot of reasons and how we might vie for grants going forward. But as you look at this accumulation, be it within the region and then within the state of Ohio, we definitely want to make sure that we are getting that count as complete as possible so that from a federal level and how money flows, Ohio in the region is getting as much potential as it can.
Because that's how they'll assign dollars for seniors, children's services, MRDD, all of those things would.
Correct, and as that money flows, it'll flow from the federal level through the state, typically to the regional level, and then allocate it out from there, so.
Okay, we'll also wait on the Veterans Committee, Historic Dublin Vision Task Force, Jane?
Yes, one of the things it's going along nicely, and I think we're getting great turnout, and Jenny Roush and the Planning Department is putting some, and with Dana's help, putting some great agendas together. The most important thing I want to publicize is that on March 3rd, Heritage Ohio is coming to do their DART assessment, and at 6 p.m. on March 3rd at the Dublin Rec Center is a town hall gathering for all residents, all citizens, businesses that are interested in having a discussion with them about their idea of what the historic district future might look like. So I know that it's in the News in 90, it's been on Nextdoor, I've been sending out emails, so please tell everyone that that is a great opportunity. If you're interested in the future of the historic district, please come and have a great town hall meeting.
Very good, thank you. Okay, Council Roundtable, Greg? Christina? Andy?
I just wanted to thank you all for indulging me at the retreat on Thursday and Friday. Jenny, if you could add duct tape to the list for next year.
You did great.
But no, good group. Appreciate the staff participation as well.
Thank you. Jane?
Well, I think Andy contributed greatly to the retreat, and I want to thank Kathy for arranging a fabulous retreat. I appreciate the staff being there, the collaboration, the interesting conversation, the opportunity to start to envision the future. I think it was a wonderful time. I think, thank you for all the effort and time you put into it, and Jeff Strom for being our facilitator. Secondly, I want to thank all of you for the great work session we had with our commissions. I know how much they appreciated that. I really appreciate the work that commission members have done to put together this aspirational framework, for all of your input on your thoughts on how to make that better. That's just going to be a great opportunity for us to work on improving and enhancing our commissions. One thing I didn't mention to you that I think is really important on the public services and the property maintenance. I understood, and I think our committee understood, that we do not have to wait for a vacant property ordinance in order to bring vacant properties in this city up to code. the intention in this code allows us, even though it's not aesthetic, it's not an aesthetic priority, health, safety, all of those are what the International Property Code requires. But there is enough teeth in this ordinance to bring vacant properties up to a standard similar to other properties along the street. And the other thing that I learned is that it is up to this council to determine at what level of enforcement you want to carry this code, because we can be very soft on enforcement on people that maybe need the help. But if you believe that some of these vacant properties are just sitting there and no one's doing anything because they don't have to, that's not true. They do have to if we decide they have to. And the code allows for that. So I think that's something that we can talk about, but...
You bring up a great point. I was in historic Dublin today. I was getting my chocolate fix at Winans. And, as I drove north out of the historic district, I see boards covering up windows. And that's not even legal per the Ohio code. Our fire people back here would tell us you can't put plywood over a window, that you have to be able to see into there, right? It's a life safety issue. That is not even something that is permitted. And Jane, I'm with you 100%. I think that it's probably time, and times are good enough that people ought to be, if you can't maintain your property right now, there's probably not going to be a time that you're more able to do it than now. And I would be all for us as a group coming together and saying, we're going to enforce these property maintenance codes, and we're going to enforce them to the extent of the law that we have the ability to do so. Because really, we're asking people, particularly in the historic district, but all around the city, to take pride in their ownership and to keep their homes in order and make upgrades and all of these kinds of things. And at the same time, we're really turning a blind eye to things that they're not just not nice, they're flat out illegal. And so I guess I would ask us to go ahead and start chasing those down.
Right. The other thing that I think is really important, it isn't just about the aesthetics. We have our firemen and our police officers that might have to go into this vacant building that nobody's been in for 5, 8, 10 years. What if they fall through the floor? What if the floor doesn't hold them? I mean, it's our responsibility, I believe, and it's a responsibility to everybody in the neighborhood whose property values depend on whether or not we take care of this. So I think, as Jennifer brings us more ordinances, but before then, I think that we have the opportunity to do some work.
Well, I would ask that we bring that back to you and we get a more consolidated direction on that. I mean, if there's certain enforcement on certain properties you'd like us to take a stronger position on now, then let's frame that as I want to make sure everyone's on board with that, and we know exactly the properties you're talking about, because I want to make sure I'm doing and directing staff to do what it is you're asking us to do. So we can wait, and we can do that as part of this report that's coming out, or you can, if you have some that you're more concerned about, I would prefer you wait just a little bit longer, and let's tie that into an overall approach here, and then we address that from that perspective before jumping into anything on property by property specifics. Let's get that all.
How far away are we from that, Dana?
What are your thoughts?
In terms of getting the committee's report out and then the adopting that new legislation, I mean, that's planning. They're going to have a large role in that memo, but I would say we could get the legislation back to you within the next month.
Okay. A month is tolerable, but
Not that I want to get that done, I just would like that to be done comprehensively. But that's, again, that's up to your direction, however you want to direct us on that.
I think at least the plywood thing needs to be resolved, because I don't want our firefighters, or I don't want someone trapped in a building and not be able to get out. That's why the windows are required to be in those buildings, so that you can get out of it. And I don't want a firefighter or somebody going into that building and not having any opportunity.
I'd like to be
address it.
real careful about that, because I don't want to assume that we're causing a safety issue for the fire department. I mean, it could be, but what I'm also telling you from a Board of Health perspective, that properties can be boarded up for the purpose of not allowing ingress and egress by animals and the like. So that is an accepted practice from that perspective. It's not one we would prefer, but I want to, I mean, if we've got a liability issue for our firefighters, then we're going to go rip it off right now, okay? And then we're going to pay, we're going to address the implication of that after the fact. So if that's where you think we are, then tell me where those are, and I'm going to go have that taken off now, and we'll deal with the legal actions later. But Chief, anything you want to say about that? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess I will anyway. So if you don't mind your perspective on that, because I certainly don't want it to be out there in any way that we somehow have a situation at hand that I need to go out and address right away.
Yeah,
And if we do, I will.
I think you bring up a great point. Actually, both sides, we want to make sure they're safe. Probably more concerned about the floor issues and structures that aren't safe in that aspect. We can deal with the windows, and we will. And I don't know exactly, to have our prevention look at exactly when you have to have it, when you don't. And again, we'd work with the city any way we can. I think part of our normal SOGs is we're going to get a means of egress in and out of that building prior to anybody going in the building. So I think we can take care of that and work with you on that. I would be more inclined to address the structural issues. That's the ones that we would have concern about, people making access and floor not being sound.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
But any direction you want to give me sooner rather than later is fine, or we can come back.
Yeah, I think if we give it the month to do that, and then maybe understanding what the law is on the plywood on the windows, because we heard something a little different in public services from our code enforcement officer. So I'm vague on that, but I think we do need to kind of wrap this up when it comes to the vacant housing issues.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you. Yep, absolutely. Kathy?
I think maybe we skipped over the admin committee, so I'm going to hop back and I'll address that sort of in my comments here. So thanks, everybody, for the retreat. Thank you, Jenny, for all your work on that retreat. And thank you for the staff who joined us. I think it was a really nice opportunity for all of us to sit around the table and have a chance to reflect on just not only the work of the last year, but we spent some time reflecting on the work really of the community and our partners and school partners and corporate partners over the last decade, and that was a very helpful thing to do and then to move forward. Look for a draft retreat report for that for your review and comment by either the end of this week or early next week. So, and please take time and give feedback on that. So we're actively already working on that. As we know, there were several follow-up items that came out of that retreat, and we will pull those together, and we will put a progress report, and we'll get that back to you. That's likely going to be more like next week or the week after on that one. But we'll get the report draft to make sure we documented it correctly, and then get the follow-ups. And I also want to remind everybody that on March 9th, we'll conduct our annual performance reviews for city manager and clerk of council. I will get a little more information out to everybody about this, but if there are specific things you want to bring to my attention, make sure we manage, that will be great. So I think that will do it for me. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. We just want to take a minute and thank the Rev 1 folks for hosting us on the 12th. Appreciate their time. Also, thank you for the retreat. I am aware of the workload that provides, and am very appreciative that was not me. So thank you that it was you. Also had the opportunity to participate in the Central Ohio Honors, honoring the legacy for Dr. King on Friday night, and it was really a wonderful celebration, and want to thank them for hosting that here in Dublin. It certainly was an energetic and informative time, so I wanted to thank them for that. With that, I have nothing further, and we are adjourned.